When we very first started breeding ball pythons, we wanted to make a super banana. Like, this was like one of the coolest things that we thought, just because we love bananas, and super bananas like were so much better because they were like the homozygous form of banana. So it was one of our very first goals, and in order to do it, we had bought a banana lesser pastel female as like a teeny tiny hatchling, and she was freaking adorable. But it wasn't until months later, because we were just starting out, that we really learned how to probe and pop snakes ourselves. And when we did this, we found out that the banana leopard or banana lesser pastel that we had gotten, little tiny female, was actually a male. But it had been months since we had bought the snake, so there wasn't really anything that we could do about it at that time. And we want to bring this up because we think that mistakes like this happen all the time. It doesn't matter who it is. When they were first starting out, there was always mistakes that people make, and you learn as you go. So this video is going to be us talking about 4 of the things that we wish we would have understood more when we were really getting into breeding ball pythons. In addition, we're going to talk about 3 things that are really, really common mistakes that we see all the time in the reptile community, especially within like the newer reptile community. We also want to talk about 2 pieces of advice that we have for new breeders. And then finally, we want to talk about 1 piece of advice that we often hear, but Courtney and I don't necessarily agree with it when it comes to breeding ball pythons. So we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you do, like, comment, subscribe, and let's get to it.
It's extremely easy to underestimate the amount of space that you need and overestimate the amount of space that you have. Hypothetically, maybe you, I don't know, build an entire snake shed for your ball pythons and think, wow, this sure is more space than we had before. We could expand a little, we could grow a little, we could work on some more projects, we can focus on more than one big recessive, and we can buy more racks. And you do. You buy 2 new racks, you buy a 5540 and a new hatchling tub and a brand new fancy incubator, and then you think, wow, this isn't quite as much space as I thought it was. As a matter of fact, it's starting to get a little cramped like it was before, but you know, at least we have all these open slots on our 5540, so we won't be needing to buy another rack anytime soon. As a matter of fact, we have 12 open spaces in that 5540, hypothetically, obviously. But maybe then your husband says that he wants to, I don't know, hold back 25 hatchlings this season alone. And you realize that unless they're double bunking in that 5540, you will need more space for them. Anyway, hypothetically, that would not be a great situation, and I hope nobody is in that situation. But in reality, don't do that.
So the second thing that I want to talk about when it comes to stuff that we wish we would have understood better when we started Leviathan Snakes is what direction did we want to go? And I think that at first we didn't really have much of a focus, and instead we were just buying animals because we wanted to buy more animals and because they were awesome, and it was like really, really exciting. And I think everybody goes through this stage. I don't think it's necessarily anything wrong, but I also think that right around the 2 to 3 year mark, most people kind of realize like what direction they really, really want to work, and that they end up selling some of those early animals that they bought. In addition, and this kind of deals with the animals, kind of deals with direction, but more business-wise, at first, when we very first started Leviathan Snakes, it was actually Courtney. Courtney is the one who started Leviathan Snakes, and she started it because when she was buying her very first ball python, she goes in a morph market, and the entire experience seemed really weird to her. The idea that you would Venmo or Cash App or PayPal friends and family somebody money for a snake that they would then send in the mail just didn't make her feel comfortable. So she wanted to make a brand that would make anybody feel comfortable, anybody feel welcome if they were going to buy an animal from us, and part of that was like documenting the entire experience. So a prospective customer would know exactly what went into everything. And it is a lot of like Courtney's focus on this in the beginning was centered around the pet owners. So that actually is something that we try to keep in mind, especially as we have gotten into like more higher end expensive projects, is that we don't want to forget the pet owners. But if we had 100% kept that in mind at the beginning, we could have done things that would have helped out pet owners way more, way faster, because it is only like within the last couple of months that we have kind of finished are breeding groups that are centered around the pet owners. So at first, very first season, we had a Butter Mojave Het Ghost. He's our Blue-Eyed Lucy male. He's absolutely beautiful, and he was paired to our Super Pastel Mystic. And that was an amazing clutch, and it was really, really popular with a lot of different people, but that was the only pair that he had. That was the only thing that like really worked for the blue-eyed, that could make Blue-Eyed Lucies that we did last year. And it wasn't until maybe like 2-ish months ago that we finally got him 2 more females that can kind of round out his breeding group. So that way, once they're all going, we'll be able to have 3 clutches of Blue-Eyed Lucies / Mystic Potions. And it's things like that. If we had just kind of remembered that in the beginning, like this is what we want to do, and taken steps to complete the Blue-Eyed Lucy breeding group before we moved on to something else, I feel like that it would have put us in a stronger position rather than having a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a little bit of 12 other projects or 12 other genes that we wanted to work with. Nothing wrong with it, but it did make it where we weren't really focused on anything to begin with.
We were thinking at the time, like, wow, this is the most beautiful mahogany, the most beautiful clown, the most beautiful banana that I've ever seen. I want to buy it and I want to produce more that look like her. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, that's a great thing. You want your animals to be beautiful and you want to have the best expression of the gene that you can find. But keep in mind that a single gene animal is going to lead to a higher quantity of animals to bring genes in, and you can quickly run out of space doing that. So for example, Stephen really liked the idea of getting mahogany into Sunset. So he wants to get mahogany into Sunset, and how does he do that? He buys the most beautiful mahogany he's ever seen. Now we have a single gene mahogany that we will pair to our single gene Sunset and produce some normal Het Sunsets and some mahogany Het Sunsets. And then in the future, we'll pair her to other things, and she will always contribute mahogany to half of her offspring. There's nothing at all wrong with that, but what we're finding out is having a beautiful example of a single gene animal is taking up more space than we have room for. Something that we've started doing this year is making sure especially a male, fits into multiple projects before we purchase him. So if we want something for freeway, say we only have asphalt males and we want to get yellow belly male, well, we want to be able to pair that male to our freeway girls, our asphalt girls, and we also want to get it into clown. So what looks good in both freeway and clown? Leopard. So we got an ivory leopard het clown male that we can pair to our females, and that way it is more efficient with finding our space. We do have a lot of single gene animals that are beautiful single gene animals and absolutely love them, but when we are planning out our pairings, we've kind of realized that we don't have long-term plans for them. And because of that, they are taking up more space than we have room for. And we're having to rethink, if we're going to be keeping them and breeding them, which is really hard when you become so attached to those animals. It's especially hard when they are a recessive animal, like a single gene recessive, because it's not really furthering anything. You can make hets by pairing them to heavy gene partners, but if you just have, for example, a single gene albino female who you love so much, the only thing she is contributing is one copy of an albino gene. So you have to pair her to a heavy gene het or visually albino or toffee animal, or you're just going to make hets. And nothing wrong with that, nothing against that, but when you're running out of space and your husband's telling you to rethink some of your purchases you've made, it gets kind of tough.
Another mistake that I 100% made, I'm pretty sure that we have a whole video on like how it didn't go well for me, but I think that everybody ends up doing this, and I think that it is generally a mistake to buy ball pythons off of Craigslist or like Facebook kind of for sale groups, especially when the person who is selling them doesn't really know much about the animal. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they are a new breeder. This means that they are rehoming an animal that they didn't produce, and they themselves are not a breeder, because what I think ends up happening is it's way too easy for an animal to be sold as a female to a potential pet owner. The pet owner never learns how to sex the animal themselves, and that when they go to sell it as a breeder female or an adult female or something like that, it's actually a male. And it's no fault to the pet owner who is rehoming it, but it is a situation that I think happens way more on Craigslist and Facebook groups than it does when it comes to like established breeders. And this doesn't mean that established breeders don't make mistakes. It 100% can happen, but an established breeder, especially if they've been around for a while or that they have a really strong reputation, they're going to be willing to make it right, where some random pet owner will be like, oh man, that sucks, I'm sorry. And that's that. And there's nothing really. So we had this happen. I had bought a pastel candy female off of Craigslist because it was a good deal. And I think that that's how almost all of this stuff starts. And after getting the animal, we found out that it was a male only when we go to ultrasound her, because I hadn't appropriately or properly sexed the animal when I was picking them up. And we found out that they were a male by ultrasounding. So that was an entire breeder female, if that makes sense, that we had planned on pairing that season that we couldn't use. So just things to keep in mind when you are buying your animals. I think that generally buying them off of Craigslist, buying them off of Facebook groups, specifically from people who are pet owners who are rehoming them, it's going to open up more risks for not only like an incorrect ID of morphs or an incorrect ID of what gender or sex that the animal is, but you also run the risk of like bringing in mites or other kind of diseases, because the pet owners are not always the ones who are like super careful about quarantining and stuff like that, especially if they don't have much experience with reptiles.
We haven't been in the hobby super duper long, but you do see people dropping out and everything. You also just see people struggling and revamping and selling part of their collection. And some things that we've noticed for people specifically that is just something to keep in mind is maybe growing a little too fast, getting really exciting, buying a ton of stuff, and then having a situation where you can't feed your hatchlings. You know, you want 10 clutches in your first season, and then bam, you have 60 babies to take care of, and you don't grow your own rodents, or you grow your own rodents and didn't account for the amount of hoppers you'd need, how quickly they eat, and how long it takes to get fresh babies that are a particular size. Growing too fast, not easing into it can be really difficult. Some people, it's not a problem at all, but keep in mind when you're getting excited, when you're like vamping up, are you moving at a pace that you can sustain? Because these babies multiply and it does get a little difficult to keep up with everything if you're not ready for it.
A lot of times, especially brand new breeders, think that they shouldn't like put out anything on social media about them being a breeder until they've successfully had their first clutch. And I've talked about this in a lot of the marketing videos. I think that this is really silly, and I think that it can actively damage your chances at success of being a successful new breeder. And the reason why, and like you'll get like old school breeders who say like, nobody cares what you have to say if you haven't even produced your own like first snake. But that's not what social media is. It's not necessarily saying, hey, listen to me because I'm an expert. Social media is a way for you to get your personality, your brand, your animals out in front of an audience. And the reason why this is important to do it before you have animals to sell is it's how you can build up trust so people know that you're not trying to scam them. And if you wait until you have your first clutch and then you try promoting it, what's going to end up happening is you're going to be like, hey, I have these animals for sale. I have these animals for sale. Nobody knows you and nobody's willing to buy from you yet. So they're just going to sit there unsold, and then you're going to be like, oh, well, nobody's willing to buy ball pythons, especially from a new breeder. The ball python market's dead. I'm going to quit and get out. But if you put in the work to market yourself on social media way before you have any clutches or any animals to sell, you will very, very likely be able to find some friends that you meet online who, when you do finally have your first clutch, want to support you. So that is the thing, is I know that it can be hard getting in front of a camera. I know it can be hard putting yourself in front of there, and there's going to be like haters. It's gonna happen, but I think that it is a mistake for new breeders not to market themselves as soon as they decide that they want to breed ball pythons.
I don't want to say that this is a mistake, because everybody's different. Everybody wants different things. Everybody wants to do different things. But one thing that we see from a lot of people who come to us, ask us about something, and we give them just our best answer, is an unwillingness to really dedicate time and effort to social media. Sometimes it's not an unwillingness, but it's like an inability to dedicate time and effort to social media. And sometimes people just don't like social media. They don't want to be any part of it. And that's fine. That's totally up to you. But I think when somebody is purchasing an animal and they have been following an account, they've been with you every step of the way, they've seen the pairing, they've seen the babies hatch, and then the animal goes up on Morph Market, they get a notification, they watch a story that tells you an animal is up on Morph Market, and it notifies you the day that animal is listed, you're more likely to not just purchase, but know that this person has what they say they have. You're more likely to know when to visit that page, that selling page, than you are for someone who bred a beautiful animal and expects it to, sell without any marketing. We view social media as a marketing tool, and while it did take me a little while to be as comfortable with it, it's very useful. So if you want the benefits of social media, you really have to put in the effort for it. We spend a lot of time on social media. We spend a ridiculous amount of time preparing content for social media, for YouTube, for Instagram, for TikTok. Not at all for Facebook. We're terrible with Facebook, but that's okay. And really, one thing that we've had to do, new baby, we've got a lot going on with us both working full time, starting to travel for work again and everything. But we batch create content, so maybe one day we'll get a babysitter, or we'll just have like my sister and mom watch the kids, and we will go out, we'll come out here and we will make YouTube videos, get content for Reels, get content for TikTok, get pictures for Instagram, and we will get an entire week's worth or maybe 2 weeks worth right in 2 days, and then go ahead and plan out all those posts so you can save them as drafts with all of the content. With all of the caption and hashtags already ready to go, and then every day just hit post. Not everybody has time for that, and I totally get it. But if you're unwilling to put in the effort to really grow your social media account and post consistently, you won't be able to reap the benefits of it.
Market yourself now. Start an Instagram. It's probably the lowest effort of all of the different social media platforms, because you can just take a bunch of pictures in one afternoon and then use that for all of your posts throughout the week. That said, if you are going to be using Instagram, I highly recommend doing Reels, even if you don't really know how to get like good Reels yet. Just take out your phone and record some stuff, opening up an enclosure and showing the ball python or anything like that, because Instagram favors Reels hardcore right now, and they are going to get you way more reach and help your account grow way faster. Once you get good at Instagram, I would suggest to transition over to YouTube if you have a video camera, or if you don't mind being in front of the camera, because YouTube lets people get a vibe for like your actual personality, where Instagram is more of just like showing the animals that you have. And I think that it's YouTube. The people who do really well on YouTube are ones where you watch their videos, and when you meet in person, it feels like that you've been their friend for years. And I think that if you can do this on YouTube, you are going to do awesome. And then lastly, I think that TikTok is the last platform that is really, really good for the reptile community. That said, I think that the audience for TikTok is a little bit different than the other two. and it is more focused on like the next generation of the reptile community. So if you can connect with like a younger generation, I think that TikTok is going to be awesome for you.
We have a lot of people who ask us, well, what should I get? What should I make? What genes should I work with? And we cannot answer that for you, because if you're not passionate, if you're not excited about the pairings, you're not going to keep up with it. So when you're deciding what you want to start breeding, breed what you would buy, breed what you like, breed what you would spend money on, and what makes you excited about the hobby and excited about your animals.
Last thing that we want to talk about is the one piece of advice that we hear a lot, but we don't actually agree with. We don't think that it is always true, and in fact, I think that at a certain point, everybody goes through a phase where it isn't true anymore. And this is the idea that if you have a female ball python and you raise her up to be an adult, that she is always going to be worth keeping because she'll produce a clutch for you. And I don't think that this is true. And the reason why I don't think this is true is because people forget that when you have that female ball python and they lay a clutch of, let's say, 6 eggs or 8 eggs or 10 eggs or even 12 eggs, that means that you now have 6, 8, 10, or 12 more snakes that you have to take care of. And if those animals are animals that are going to sit in your facility for a long period of time because maybe they have a gene in them that isn't super sought after or kind of turns people off. And nothing against like that, but spider is like an example of this. A lot of people have a hard time selling spiders, and when you do have spider in a combo, it often reduces the value of that combo because people don't want spider that much anymore. Now, if you have a spider female, yes, she will 100% produce a clutch for you every single year, and you can sell those babies and you can make like money off of it. But is the effort of the sales on those babies, especially if they're going to be hard to sell, and the space requirements to care for all of them, does it balance out? And I think that at a certain point, everybody gets to a stage of breeding where they are going to have so many holdback animals that they start moving out those lower end animals that they had first got or that were their very first clutches. And I think that this is where the always keeping a breeder female isn't necessarily true. I think that when it gets to the point that you are running low on space to where you don't feel like you can just add another rack or something, I think that that's when you have to start looking at like, okay, yes, this female might be able to produce a clutch for me this year, but is it going to be better to sell her now and get the money as a breeder female, or to wait until we have all the hatchlings and then do all the work to sell all of those hatchlings, and you'll still be low on space at the end of it. So breeder females are awesome, and I definitely think that it's a good idea to get a couple like single gene females, especially when you start out, because they're going to be more affordable and it lets you learn all of the different processes needed to breed ball pythons without having a bunch of stuff like on the line. If you had bought this powerhouse clown female that you grow up from a hatchling and then you first start breeding, it's gonna be really, really stressful because you haven't really done it before. But if you have some breeder females that maybe like a single gene Inchi or a GHI or anything like that, I think that it's going to be perfect. You're gonna be able to make some amazing pets from those animals, and it's going to let you learn the process of breeding ball pythons by doing it. So we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next week.